Good morning, it's good to see you all. I find it early, but I guess you're kind of maybe used to this, but good morning, good to see you. Smiles are always nice. My name is Joel Ivany, and I live here in Toronto. I have a family, I have a beautiful wife, her name is Miriam. Miriam was born in Damascus in Syria, and she moved to Canada with her family when she was 7, so her first language is Arabic. But then she had to quickly learn English when she was kind of thrown into school with a bunch of kids when you're 7. So she quickly learned English, but language is kind of cool for that because she speaks a language that I tried to learn, which was very, very difficult. We have a beautiful son. He's almost 2. He'll turn 2 February 16th, so it's coming up. And his name is Salim, which is after her dad. And his middle name is David, which is after my dad, but we call him Sammy. And Sammy is a special, fun little boy. My occupation, I direct opera, which again kind of ties in with language pretty well. I work in very different, it's kind of contract to contract, so you kind of have to plan your year, hopefully 2 years, maybe even you can scratch into 3 years of where am I going to work. And often it's not in the same city, and it's hopefully not for too long, but long enough that you can achieve something cool and good. Opera, there it is. What I kind of learned about opera was kind of fascinating because when you just kind of decide to get into opera, opera has this sort of a lot of things that are attached to it, meaning it's in a very expensive art form and it's very difficult to kind of, there's a lot of people involved. So how can I sort of, as a creative stage director, how can I sort of get into that world? No one's going to give me a $3 million production straight out of U of T. So it meant kind of looking at it a new way, and what I did was 5 years ago I started my own company called Against the Grain Theater. And clearly, we're the future of opera because it's right there in that quote. What it was is we took opera and we said, well, how come I haven't been introduced to it necessarily at 24 or 5 years old? Part of it is, I think, now kind of our education growing up, it just wasn't introduced. And part of it was, it's a kind of difficult art form because of either the language barrier that can get in the way or the kind of grandness of it, the size of it. If we were speaking to you with 1,000 people, it would be a little bit less intimate than it would be right now. But obviously it's pretty important. Opera, the 4 staples tend to be French, German, Italian, English. And language plays a key role, letters. So again, I mentioned I have my son, Sammy, and Sammy's a pretty special guy, but what I have here is a video of him, which I'm going to play for you, and it kind of illustrates language and sort of understanding. It's communicating, and ideally in opera you're communicating one idea or one story to the audience who are there to watch. And sort of if you miss a little bit of it, maybe the messaging is different. So hopefully the sound works on this, but this is Sammy. Yeah. Yeah, there's Sammy. So part of that is by just kind of leaving out one letter, we hear something different than what he is kind of trying to say. There are a lot of clocks there, but we hear something different. That's why kind of communication and language can be a very important thing. I like to use sort of what I like to do is I like to access my creative language. For me, it's kind of what is already being said in the world, where my environment, and what isn't being said, and maybe I'll say that because it isn't being said, or try to at least, if that makes sense. What's that caused me to do is trying to think outside the box. Think outside the box. Yeah. Right? This kind of just loops, so it may get distracting enough. We'll find out. What it was is, personally, in opera, I wanted to do the big. Give me the $3 million, $4 million projects, and let's learn that way, and let's access my craft that way. But what kind of starting my company, what was exciting was everyone kind of wanted to hear more about doing stuff in a smaller, more intimate way by changing up the rules of what was generally associated with opera and doing it in a brand new way. So all of a sudden, I was being recognized for other things. This is a stock image of a production of The Marriage of Figaro, kind of how maybe you'd imagine opera to be. And what I wanted to do was, we kind of made our first big splash by presenting it differently. What I did was I took all the Italian away, and then I rewrote it all in English, and I set it in 2013 at the time. And it became Figaro's Wedding. A big part of the Italian opera is you never actually see them get married. It's called Marriage of Figaro, but they kind of just play over a bit of music. Some guy kind of waves his hand like this, and then they're married. And then, so for me, it was a big thing to kind of push, well, how do we present a wedding that we all connect to? For me, it's also not just about the story, but also the environment that it lives in. So what we did was we rented out the 6th floor of the Burroughs building, Queen in Bathurst, which people would typically rent out for your wedding. And so it was decorated as if you were coming to a wedding. And you were sort of given a present as you took the elevator up, and here you are attending this wedding. We had aisles. Susanna walked down the aisle. We all kind of stood up and did sort of what we associate with weddings, but this was kind of an opera, which was kind of fantastic. What we also did was we introduced new techniques via social media. Susanna was proposed to by Figaro at the AGO, which we showed on YouTube. And then another few weeks before the show opened, we played this video.
Does this one make my butt look fat? The dress is kind of you look beautiful. I mean, you make it work. We can try on another one, you know.
Financially, do you have enough money for this dream wedding?
What question is that? I mean, it's a wedding. It's about love, right? It's not about money, is it?
I know that I'm getting married to my soulmate, which ultimately is like the best.
They haven't really decided if I'm a bridesmaid or groomsman, but you know, I'm kind of helping both sides because they're both my friends. So wherever I can fill in the gaps, Dina will be there.
Yeah, just hang on. I just gotta finish this text, right? No, I don't need it.
I see the spark in Susanna and Figaro that Al and I had on our wedding day, and in the planning and the stress and all of that stuff. But it brings back some really nice memories.
Married life? Can't say much about it. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Has he made any advances on Susanna that you know?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I hope that he never would.
No. Why? Are people saying something?
Have I noticed? Yes, I've noticed.
I feel a little spark between us.
My hope is that no one else notices because obviously he is the best man.
Yeah, he's just messing everything up for everyone. Like, this is supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. Seems like he's always getting his nose in other people's business.
I don't want to get in the middle of that. I just want something.
It's Alberto. He's got a roving eye. What can you say? It's just how he is. She's way too good for him. Totally. She could be way better. I could show her something different, for sure.
I always get what I want. I don't care if it's Figaro's wedding.
Figaro's wedding? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Figaro's wedding. I'm the one in the middle of all the drama, so it should be called Susanna's wedding, but we'll just go with Figaro's wedding for now.
Figaro's wedding. Can we just move on?
Oh my god, so terrible.
Yeah. So that was kind of done. It's kind of weird to start a startup opera company. We started around 2008-9, where everyone was like, the financial world is awful, so why would you start something new? So it was a really kind of tough time, but what it was an idea of, again, thinking outside the box and speaking in a new language for this art form, which kind of caught the world, at least, of classical music and opera in this city, kind of, and said, what is this? This is new, and I kind of want more of that. It was enough that it drew attention from a very cool art center, which is the Banff Center. If you haven't been to the Banff Center before, at least go to Banff. There's beautiful mountains, and there's actually an art center right in the middle of it, which kind of want to do what the world is not doing, meaning what can we do here that is not being done anywhere else? And they said, Joel, can you come and kind of reimagine what opera could look like on a probably more reasonable budget? So what it was kind of rethinking by taking the idea of what I did and retelling it anew. What we did was we took, again, the second story of Don Giovanni, which is maybe another opera you've heard, a Mozart opera. If you haven't, it's kind of crazy tale of this kind of one guy who, again, he's known as this womanizing guy who kind of terrorizes women, sometimes physically, sometimes just with his sensual words. We reimagined it called #Uncle John. In the Banff Center, what we did was we set it actually outdoors. This was an outdoor opera, which was at the Cave and Basin, a National Historic Park, and it was very difficult for people at the Banff Center because they said, why, we have this beautiful theater, why on earth would we do it not there? But as soon as they got the idea of what we wanted it, and it kind of starts just by that initial idea, they kind of fell in love with it and sort of just went with it all the way. That went over so well. We also did that here in Toronto, that last summer we imagined his third opera that he did called Così fan tutte. We called it A Little Too Cozy. And what it was we set this kind of, opera has a bad rap or it has a real rap of having the most ridiculous plot lines ever. What I try to do with these reimaginings is try to say, well, let's try to justify an actual situation where this may exist. And what we did is we set this kind of crazy plot in a reality wedding show, similar to kind of, I guess, Married at First Sight, if you've ever heard of that, but can two people fall in love with each other having never physically seen each other? So it's kind of like they've been sequestered in two houses. They're allowed to text and email, and can you get to know someone that way, sort of the real heart of someone. And we're all invited to the final taping where we kind of see them walk down the aisle if they're made for each other. But there's one final twist which is introduced, which we get to all be a part of. It again went over very well at the Banff Center, and we're planning to do it with my company Against Grain Theatre here in Toronto this coming May, which we're very close to announcing, because for me, again, the venue is just as important as the characters, the music, which is Mozart, old, brand new story set in 2016. So look for that, which is going to be exciting. Again, it's reanimating an older art form, the language of it. Here's another, this one's a little shorter, 45-second video that we used for that.
You've fallen in love with them for the past 8 weeks. Now, there's only 2 couples left. Dora and Fernando, and Felicity and Elmo. They may have found their match, but there's always a catch. You do not want to miss the 2-hour season finale of A Little Too Cozy. With me, your host, Donald Alfonso. Can you fall in love with someone you've never met? That's all right, great.
Yeah. So what it is kind of getting it. What we're finding is it's by speaking this new language of a new way of introducing this art form. It's kind of we're finding the next generation of singers are saying that this is actually possibly a way to do opera, and it's kind of just reanimating and opening their minds as well. How does that translate? This allows me to think outside the box and tackle sort of every day, for whether it's brushing my teeth, but it's kind of how can you brush your teeth differently? You buy one of those electric ones maybe or something like that. But it kind of allows me to tackle things in a new way and sort of, again, step back and say, this has been done the same way for so long, but maybe there's a new way to communicate ideas and thoughts which either hasn't been done or I can take that from this and apply it to that. My most recent project was with a unique collaboration with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, which is a traditional organization. And what we did is they don't usually hire stage directors for their work. Normally the symphony is used for hearing beautiful music. So I was inspired by an idea of a fellow director who worked with the Berlin Philharmonic over in Germany. And so I took that idea to the Toronto Symphony Orchestra and said, if you ever want to try something like this, let's give it a go. So what we did was this is a standard interpretation of Mozart's Requiem, which just happened this past weekend. And you can see it's very structured. The groups are kind of defined. The lighting is kind of well lit, and they all have their books. What I asked them to do is, let's kind of lose the books, let's add some lighting, let's give the chorus some gestures, and let's break the routine of what is kind of normal. This was this past weekend at the TSO at Roy Thompson Hall. It's not dramatically different. You can kind of see there's little pools of special lighting. They all had their own little chairs, no scores anywhere. Everyone's in black, no tuxedos, and they're all kind of gesturing there at the same time, which is fantastic, and beautiful blue lights. What it was kind of how was that received? It was kind of interesting because a lot of people found it earth-changing, that they went up to the president in tears saying how it transformed their life. Some people apparently went up as well and said, you're a charlatan and you're ruining classical music with your innovation. And it wasn't really like that dramatic of a step, but it was a step which is kind of good. Sometimes you have to be aware and sensitive of who you're working with and how you're working with them. So again, that was kind of good. It challenged me, working in an art form with a group of people that I don't normally work with. It challenged the symphony as an institution, it challenged the artists, and it challenged the audience at the same time. You also have to know you've done something good when sometimes you, I guess, can piss people off. And there was one beautiful, he may be here, I have no idea, who had a personal blog, who wanted to put his thoughts on his experience after experiencing the Mozart Requiem. He said... He said that Joel Ivany's a pretentious fucktard. And he goes on to just kind of, it's just Joel Ivany that he had a problem with, which is kind of fun, I guess. You've done something well when you stir up that much passion over a Mozart Requiem. So, and again, it wasn't that dramatic if there was no urine or anything involved in the production. This was just kind of a couple gestures and some lighting. But again, it can really piss people off. But again, that's what happens when you change things. So what that tells me is that change is never easy for everyone. But art, my industry, life, it must continue to evolve and change and grow if it's meant to kind of be something new and exciting. So that's what I'm trying to do. If personally it's a challenge because I experience with my own company, there's no boss really because that's me. So I can do exactly whatever I want, which is kind of freeing when you're kind of doing that. When you work with other people, that's what's the challenge is kind of how do you create that team environment. I'm directing Carmen with the Canadian Opera Company this coming April, which is again the big, and in the proscenium style. And how can I take any of this and put that into that? So it comes with its challenges, but again, the language it's hopefully changing what opera that word can mean for people in Toronto and also for people who work in other fields as well. So that's my version of language this morning. Thanks.